Hi, I'm Tom R. Welcome to this session of Village Connect. So this time we're going to talk about a story you're pretty familiar with, but I want you to read it again. It's the story of David and Goliath. And so take a moment, find it. It's in 1 Samuel 17, verses 1 through 54. It'll take you a little while to get through all of that, but read that, and when you finish, come back and we'll get the conversation started. I don't know if you know of Dorothy Day. Dorothy Day was a woman who started the Catholic social worker movement. She was active in ministry among the impoverished and the powerless. She was active in the civil rights movement. But Dorothy Day once said, "If I did anything significant in my life, it's because I was never afraid to talk about God." My grandfather was a faithful man. He ushered in Sunday services for 65 years, I think. He helped collect and count the money every Monday morning for the church and deposit it in the bank. He served on the church's session for as many years of his adult life as not. He loved to tell a joke. He loved to tell a good story, particularly if he had told it before. But when it came to matters of faith, he said he preferred not to wear his beliefs on his sleeve, he would say. He preferred his deeds to speak for themselves. My grandfather was a more faithful man than I, and his deeds were pretty consistent and impressive. But I wonder if he may have had a overconfidence in his deeds. What I mean is, sometimes deeds without a word is dead. Sometimes faith has to be spoken. It has to be named. So you've read the story of David and Goliath, and you know the story is about the little guy who overcomes the giant, the one with no resources that overcomes the mighty warrior. There's something else in this story. What David does is he speaks of God. If you pay attention, until David shows up, this is a battle between the armies of Saul and the armies of the Philistines. But David is the first one to mention God. Saul never mentions God. David's brothers never mention God. It's just the story of my team against your team. And Goliath is intimidating. But what happens is David speaks of God. And all of a sudden, when God is mentioned, Goliath is no longer the biggest guy in the room. Everything changes in that. So what am I saying? I'm saying that I think it's important for us to learn to speak our faith. So I think what we learn here is it's important for us to talk about our faith. Not just to live it, but to actually talk about it. Now, that's not easy. One of the reasons it's not easy is we think that if we're to talk about it, we've got to be sure about it. Well, I don't think that's helpful. You know me, I'm a guy of belief and unbelief all at the same time. I think you are too. As a matter of fact, people who are certain about their faith run a risk of reducing their faith to something small. But if faith is going to be big, if it's going to be demanding, if it's going to be about the biggest things in our lives, it's always going to be carried with a degree of uncertainty. Tom Long, he said once, when we talk about our faith, what we think we're doing is we're just finding the language to give voice to beliefs we've already figured out in our heads. He said, but it's actually more complicated than that. He said, when we talk about our faith, It's not something we've already figured out, that talking about it is part of how we come to believe what we believe. This makes complete sense to me. All the time, I am trying to find language to express what I believe. And my experience is the effort to find the language is part of what solidifies and grows my own faith. So I think what David shows us is when we can learn to speak God into the room, our lives are enriched. There was a woman named Sarah. Sarah lived in the 80s when the nation's protocol to protect the blood supply was limited, and Sarah had a minor surgery. She got a pint of blood, and quickly she got HIV, which developed into AIDS. In the 80s, the only thing worse than the disease was the stigma. And this grandmother, who was faithful in her church, found herself making her church afraid because she was sick. But one day, Sarah, in Sunday morning worship, she walked down to the front. She had taught Sunday school in that church for her whole life. She walked down to the front, and this grandmother, she spoke to her friends in that congregation, and she said, "I have AIDS, and it's going to kill me. And I hate that. And I hate that this has unsettled you. I know many of you are praying for me, and I am grateful for your prayers. But I'm here today not to ask for your prayers. I'm here today to do what was done in the early church. I'm here to give my testimony," she called it. She said, "I want you to know that even though I hate what has happened to me, I'm not afraid. Jesus said that illness and death will not have the last word, and I am his child, and I'm not afraid." And then she said, "And remember this day, for when suffering comes to you, and it will come to you, when it comes to you, remember I was here, and remember what I have said to you, and do not be afraid." People in that church still talk about that day. And in that congregation, they faced some hard things, like every congregation. And they remember the testimony of Sarah. She was like David. She spoke God into the room, and it changed everything. I don't know if you know about Dorothy Day. She was an inspiring woman. She accomplished a lot. Her deeds were strong. But she said, "If I have achieved anything in my life, it's because I was never afraid to talk about God."